Hey guys, I see you all signing up and logging in. We're just going to wait another couple minutes to make sure that we have a good group with us from the start. Hang in there. Hey everyone, we're just going to wait another couple minutes, maybe a minute or two, so more folks can be with us from the beginning. Hang tight. Hi guys, people are still coming on pretty rapidly, so we're just going to hold for another 60 seconds or so before we get started. Hey everyone, we're just going to wait 30 more seconds. People are still coming on pretty quickly. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. If at any point you have trouble hearing us, please use the chat function to let us know. Otherwise, we're going to dive in. My name is Ariel Glassman, and I am a fundraising consultant in Seattle, Washington. I have been a fundraiser for 18 years and a consultant for 8 years, and I've worked with about 85 nonprofits in Seattle, San Francisco, LA, DC, and Boston. And I've done every kind of fundraising, and I've had, roles at every level inside organizations. And my real specialty is fundraising strategy and helping organizations connect the bigger picture of their strategy with their operations and actually what it takes to get that done. Talia, how about you?
Hi, I'm Talia Silveri, right? I am a fundraising consultant who specializes in event production and digital media. I've always paired the two because I really do firmly believe that events take place in person and in a digital space. So I'm so grateful that I've always held these two concepts together because that's the moment we're living in. So it's a real privilege to talk to you all for the second day in a row, and I'm looking forward to getting more into it. And if you have more questions about our backgrounds and stuff, you could check out our LinkedIn or ask something in the comments.
Awesome, thank you. So Talia and I go way back. We've worked together on at least 10 projects. So when I had the idea for this webinar, I knew I needed an events expert, and I texted her straight away. She's always at the top of my list for events because she's got fundraising chops that most event specialists don't. She's not the person you go to for centerpieces and decor. She's the one you go to for like smart audience development strategy and integrating major gifts into your event, right? She's in the middle of some crazy experiences with her event clients right now. So I'm really grateful that she said yes anyway, because now we all get to learn from it in real time.
Ugh, you're too much. I mean, honestly, I do actually love a centerpiece and a decor moment. It's just that it's not always a priority because I'm about getting the money. And that's really the niche that I found in what I do. Before I even say another word, I just want to thank Ariel for coming up with this idea and sharing this platform in this space with me. It has been, in the midst of a crisis, a bright spot. And the term bright spot, I wouldn't even use as part of my vernacular if it weren't for my mentor, Ariel Glassman. So she's the best of the best. And, when the going gets tough, Ariel's on speed dial. And that's just something that has really seen me through this moment as I'm still really working through real-time triage moments with event cancellation.
Awesome. So that brings us to the current situation. We just want to kind of talk about where things are. So Talia and I are broadcasting live from Seattle, Washington. We're actually in the offices of the Riveter, a female-led co-working space, which is awesome. I'm a member.
Shout out to the Riveter.
Seattle is the epicenter of the COVID pandemic right now in the US. Like, the city is at the forefront of nonprofits dealing with the impacts of coronavirus. So Talia and I turned this content around in about 4 or 5 days because we knew the time was of the essence and we wanted to get the wisdom out there. But things are shifting so rapidly that we had to rewrite sections in real time, even as early as this morning. So, we wish we had all the time in the world to cover everything under the sun about this possible topic, but we've chosen to cover 2 things. We are going to talk about what's right in front of us, which is events. And second, we are going to talk about individual giving work for the rest of the year. That's where 80% of philanthropy comes from nationally, and what you actually have the greatest ability to influence with changes in strategy. So it's the place where you can be nimble and pivot and have that effort actually make a difference. To my Seattle fundraising colleagues, I am profoundly proud of how I see you and the Seattle nonprofit community responding to this challenge. I'm seeing really effective ideas for virtual luncheons, virtual galas, great communication coming out from organizations, and real organizational vulnerability and action that's building relationships with donors in a challenging time. And I'm seeing great thought leadership come out, by our service organizations and our consultants. And, we're all pushing through our fear and anxiety and natural resistance to the unknown. And that is hard. What I see is that we continue to be a city of immense creativity and compassion with the will and the skills to get it done. And that shows in the work you all are doing.
Snaps.
Other cities are soon going to be in the same boat as us. And I want you all to get ahead of this curve while you still can. You know, we are seeing and walking around corners right now that you don't yet know exist, and I want you to benefit from that. Mm-hmm. So everyone on here who is calling in from a place that is not Washington State, welcome. We see you. We want to be in community with you, and we need you to be in community with us too. Right now, there are 1,000 people registered for this webinar, representing 754 nonprofits in 301 cities across 44 states and 3 countries. And that is amazing. And it speaks volumes about the people who work in this sector, the grit and resilience you have, and how eager you are to face this challenge head on.
Right. And we have a wait list too. So if you know somebody who didn't get a chance to get in on this, please feel free to link them to the wait list. Ariel has it on her LinkedIn, and that's a great way to still get the content that we're putting out today.
And we'll send it out after.
Yeah. And you know, just before we jump in to Ariel's point, and you know, yesterday when we did this, I definitely like cried when she said this piece, because Seattle's really struggling. Some of my favorite restaurants, my favorite bakery just closed today. I saw it first thing this morning. My heart is broken over this. And without going too far deep into it, I'm just going to kind of take a deep breath with me. And let's try to focus on the task at hand, because we've got work to do. All right. So our agenda is going to focus on event stuff and then move on to the big picture of your fundraising year. And Ariel is going to be your tour guide on this piece with some commentary from me. And you know, then we're going to really work through some high-level strategic guidance for all of it, and really try to stitch together how the event cancellation really is inextricably linked to the rest of what you're doing this year and beyond. Okay, so spring events are fundraising events in this context, and you know, the framework.
Sorry, guys, we're having some technical difficulties for a second.
That's so funny, because this happened at the same time yesterday, technical difficulties.
Well, hang on, guys.
I feel like I'm in Groundhog's Day. That's like deja vu. Cute. All right.
Okay.
This is how I start getting goofy too, when I start ad-libbing. So I'm just going to bring it back to the task at hand. Essentially, the framework for this is that it's more than just about spring events. These are extraordinary circumstances, and how you move on with your event is going to impact the rest of your year as it relates to fundraising. It's rippling into other areas of your organization now. And, you know, this is where we are. Events don't just exist in a vacuum. In fact, there are a lot of my clients who come to me specifically to right-size their event in order to ensure that A, the lift for staff is commensurate with the revenue, and B, to ensure that the event is meeting the objective to fundraise. So depending on how healthy your event is at this moment in time is really going to make a big impact on your decision moving forward. So very quickly, in regards to measuring health, in case you're going to ask me that question in the comments, and feel free, by the way, to chime in on the comments once I'm done talking and Ariel starts kind of taking the mic. I'm going to help moderate today. So depending on how healthy your event is at this moment of time is really where you need to start grounding yourself. And if you don't have memorized what the cost to raise a dollar is for your event, do that now. And in our follow-up resources, we'll help anybody who is wondering about how to calculate that. Ariel likes to calculate that on the net and the gross, and I have prescribed to that same methodology over the years. So before we dive in further, we also want to clarify that we're talking about fundraisers. We're talking about the events that are making money, honey. All right. We could go all in on cultivation events and stewardship events and all the other kinds of things that you're doing. A lot of our clients, especially because Ariel and I are in the arts world, their whole operating model, because there is gathering. They're a theater.
Rapidly disappearing.
This is gathering over 250 people. So really what we want to emphasize is that, like, the pressing matter at hand is that it's spring gala season, right? Lunch and breakfast. And those are the types of events that we want to talk about today, because that's what's happening right now. But I think that some of the strategies that we're going to put forth do apply to a brave new world of digital communications. And I think that they can be repurposed for inventive house parties and tours of your facility and anything like that, because what we're talking about is investing right now in being a good visual communicator. And I love that. That's fun. That's my favorite part of my job. So let's talk about what to do. And we're going to use the word pivot, which I cannot literally say without thinking about Ross from I don't know if any of you are fans out there, pivot. So if you just need a moment of levity, anytime we say pivot, if you want to say it the Ross way, if that makes you feel good, do it, because it feels really good to smile right now. That releases endorphins. So throughout this webinar, we're going to settle on a few moments of real talk. And Ariel kind of came up with this because, like, you know, usually when we do webinars, we're trying to like be really professional, but we haven't had a lot of time to prepare. And so we're really being our real selves. And that feels good, honestly. Like this is one of the more authentic forums I've ever participated in. So
yeah, I think the focus on real talk is really about the fact that I do think there are ways to be decisive right now. And I think that, you know, Talia and I, who we are as people and who we are as consultants, it's about telling you what's really up. We're not going to steer you wrong. We're not going to hem and haw, and we're not going to sort of keep you hanging in limbo or suggest that you should be hanging in limbo with your organizations and your donors. So my first real talk moment is to say that this time for hesitation is over, right? Indecision is not your friend right now. And leadership involves making tough decisions. And this is the moment when you as a leader need to step up to the plate or work inside your organization to advocate for decisiveness. Your pivot has to start now. You know, the time for plan B is here.
Yes. Yes. And honestly, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I'm not one for blanket recommendations. I'm really outside of my comfort zone in a lot of the content here, just because it's really a generalization that I'm sure a lot of you are going to feel that at times, right? So just know that we are going to make ourselves available to you for like one-off scenarios, but given the very rapidly evolving circumstances in this situation, from a fundraising perspective, postponing an event is just not sitting right with me and my clients for a number of reasons. And when Ariel and I, when this whole thing started unfolding, as soon as I got on the phone with her and kind of gut checked that, and we really did gut check it. I just want to emphasize the fact that like my colleague Kay, my business partner, Ariel, and I have been in constant conversation since this whole thing arrived, and we're feeling like we've poked holes in it enough that we're at least solid in this recommendation. So the impetus of all of this is because we were forecasting that there could be a ban on public gatherings. And so in Seattle, that happened on Wednesday, right? So we changed all our slides in order for Thursday to be accurate. And now even like since that announcement, it's looking like there's going to be some parameters around smaller events that will require strict sanitation standards. And so I haven't really had time to dive deep into that, but if any of our community members who are listening have some resources that they want to link that are Washington or Seattle specific about the public health stuff, please feel free. And, you know, even as of yesterday, I talked to my best friend who's in LA. You know, things are changing rapidly as it relates to social distancing and gatherings. And so we're in a new norm.
Yeah, there's actually, since Seattle did that, other states and cities have started to take that step too. So we're seeing now more places have actual bans on public events of various sizes.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it's just happening so fast. So, you know, at this point, when we first started, there were more options. There were more options when I was working through this process with my client, whose event, I'm going to reference Solid Ground a few times throughout this because it's playing out in real time. Love them, solidground.org. Shout out to that team. They're inspiring, and I cannot take credit for every single idea that I'm going to say because they are wizards. So this might happen to you if you're not in Washington. And if you're in Washington, Seattle, it is happening to you right now, and you got to figure something out. So really, what we're trying to do is really center what is in the best interest of the nonprofit. And it's always just figuring out an action plan and being decisive, right? That's how crisis communications work. So now that you are considering your options between pivot into virtual, right? Do something now, or postponing, we have some things that we want you to think about. And so, like I said, we're going to keep talking about pivot. And essentially, there's a difference between pivoting and postponing. And for us, what is not sitting right about postponing is for summer, right? And we had some specific questions around, well, what about April? What about May? What about June? I don't know, honestly. I can't answer that for you. Ask me tomorrow, I might know, right? But for us, the most pressing matter is your revenue. I know some organizations who have 30 days, to start making money again, or else they're not going to make payroll. So just get it dialed and figure out a way to pivot quickly into whatever you're going to do. And we're going to focus on pivoting into a virtual experience as it relates to this conversation. Okay. So another reason that's not sitting well with me is that in Seattle, at least, and definitely based on my business, fall is like the busiest season for event fundraising. And for me, thinking about events that are in organizations who always do spring, I have had some clients come to me saying, can you move our fall event to spring? And that's challenging in and of itself. And it's
spring to fall.
Fall to spring, because
okay.
they feel the competition is so tough.
Ah.
Right? Like all it takes is one donor to be like, oh, I usually go to the Henry Gallery, or you know what I mean? Like, oh, I just the Henry Gallery's in spring. Shout out to Henry. But you don't want to be in competition with your peers and your nonprofits, and you want to be strategic about what works for your organization and your staff. And so there's a lot there. So it's risky. And summer, like I said, we just don't know. But either way, if in the next 2-3 months you have a lot of revenue at stake, it would behoove you to really think about pivoting to this strategy. And so pivot. You're capitalizing on the momentum that you've already invested in your event. It's not just the expenses and the vendors and all of that. It's like the marketing PR hype machine that has been building to something that might not really feel relevant 6 months from now, especially given that the current zeitgeist out there is like unprecedented. Like, it's just weird out there, right? So this one makes me laugh. Ariel put in my script as the headline, postponing sucks and it's unclear.
And what I really mean is it's a mixed message to donors, right? Like, if you postpone, you're basically saying, we want you to give at some point in the future. We don't know when, but don't give now. And I think that's really leaving them without clear direction. And, donors are waiting for a signal from you on how and when they should act. And that postponement thing kind of puts them in limbo, which is kind of psychologically uncomfortable at best, and is going to cost you money because they should be giving now.
Ariel said it best. And this is really what really validated my instinct on this. She said, all right, not doing something now is like saying to your donors, give at some point in the future. We don't know when, but don't give now.
Yeah.
Right. And like, we experienced this after the 2016 election with some clients where there was a little bit of a rally of support in a tough time for organizations whose mission ran counter to the politics of that moment. Right. And so, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of small businesses that are hurting in Seattle, more so than nonprofits, frankly.
Yeah. And honestly, Talia, to your point, I do see a rally happening in certain places.
Yeah.
I did speak with the head of fundraising for a major hospital who's actually treating a lot of people right now. And they got an influx of like $250,000 overnight
That's
when they put up a
amazing.
campaign page, and they didn't even like send out
That's
asks.
amazing.
So people are, I see optimism. I see people rallying,
That's
which
right.
is another reason I feel really confident making this recommendation that decide now, pivot now, virtual now, don't postpone your in-person event till later.
Totally. I mean, right before we did this, Ariel and I were trying to figure out for our own organizations that we support, how we can prioritize, how we can make something happen. So all to say, postponing is just a luxury that some organizations don't have due to cash flow, due to all of those other internal and external factors. And for those organizations, postponing can compromise their programs and their ability to really deliver on what's about to come, probably a really acute need for especially direct service organizations who are helping people experiencing homelessness and food banks and a lot of the folks who are on the front lines.
Yep. So again, we're going to just say real talk. Some people are still in denial about this, and it is time to snap out of it. We really don't have options. It is time to cut your losses. And as Talia said, the time is to capitalize on the investment that you've already made.
Yeah. It honestly felt really good too. Like there was that moment of uncertainty where we're like, we could postpone, we could cancel, and then we embraced the brave new world, and it was inspiring, honestly. I mean, I tend to be a little bit of a silver linings person, so I draw from that. And you know, I would all try to encourage you to try to put a positive spin on things, because you could actually be cracking open an opportunity that I've always been trying to get my clients to do more digital stuff. So I'm excited that this is kind of forcing us into this realm. All right, we're going to get into a little bit more content here. So bear with me. Ariel knows I'm a little bit of a circular talker and I go on tangents. So I hope it's not boring and annoying and rather entertaining for you. So, and honestly, it's because right now is really stressful for me. I am
with my clients. It's a confusing time.
Kind of, and I'm sure a lot of you who are in this moment where you have a March event are feeling some grief over the year of planning. Don't feel like you're just flushing that down the toilet. That is not the case. You have to take control and reset. And if you can still galvanize and utilize that date that you've saved with your contingency to do something, you're going to win. I promise you. Even if it's not a financial success, it's going to be an optic success, and your donors are going to see you. So and I mean, that's the case with everything, right? The most inventive responses to adversity throughout history have become products and services and norms. Ariel and I wouldn't even be collaborating and enjoying this moment, right? To get to partner and do what we used to do for 3 years working together if it weren't from this dire circumstance. So, try to find those little bright spots throughout your work. So as you're coming together with your team to figure out what to do, you get in that huddle, and whoever's in charge should write up everything they know about the event and lay out all the options. So as the event planner, contracted fundraising consultant, I took that on and just did the pros and cons. It's always a good sign when once you go through that and work through that with the team, if it ends in a brainstorm, you have your winner. Everybody's bought in to the plan, which means that they're going to try hard and engage. And so, let that little brainstorm happen, but make sure you get some action items out of that meeting, right? One of my big action items from that meeting as the events person was, telling my supervisor at, my client, get on the phone with the lawyers so that we just get in their queue, because I know that they're busy, and oh man, are they so busy. Their phones are lighting up like a Jerry Lewis telethon, like it's crazy. So get on the lawyer's radar, because you're going to need to help look at contracts for this, right? You have to figure out what your investment has already been, but you don't necessarily have to have that be based on your decision. That was the case a week ago when there were more options, but it's not the case anymore, right? There's less and less options every day, right? we're all signing up for Zoom accounts, and now they're doing surge pricing so that people can, do virtual meetings. So, really, truly, we're telling you, like, this is it.
But one of the reasons we want you to sort of get with the lawyer is you might now have the ability to invoke the force majeure. You want to tell us a little about that, Talia?
Well, as consultants, even in our own contracts, we have a force majeure clause. It's standard legalese for an act of God. And I've always been aware of this, especially for my clients where I produce outdoor events and galas, because it is very possible that, something could get rained out, which would essentially be an act of God. So that's why we get insurance, and that it's in there for a reason. It's in there because things have happened before and they will happen again, right? Murphy's Law, knock on wood, everybody take a deep breath. So force majeure is a thing. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to give you legal advice, but get on the phone with a lawyer, read that clause and understand it and move forward accordingly. And this has to do with your vendors, right? And I'm not saying you should be trying to get out of every contract. Actually, I think that your vendors are your partners. They're thinking creatively right now too. They're assets. Just because you're not necessarily doing something in person doesn't mean that this team that you've assembled they're going to lend help if at all possible, right? Or even if they can't lend to a virtual experience, they could be repurposed later in the year for something else. Businesses are hurting. And if you feel like your organization has the means to repurpose a contract or think creatively about how to work with people, do that. That is all good karma on you. So look at those contracts, figure it out, but know that leading with those creative solutions is going to relieve your partners, and they're going to collaborate with you rather than try to pressure you to postpone or do something that's in their business's interest. It's not in a mean way. It's not like they're trying to give you bad advice. They have a business too. It's business, right? But keep centered on what your organization is supposed to be doing right now, making money. So if they're giving you advice, they have their own interests at heart, right? Be smart about it. And then, what can you repurpose digitally? Everything. You have all these design assets. You have all these print materials. You
videos,
have keynote speakers, videos. I mean, the reason why events folks are digital media people is because it's the same project management, it's the same development of assets, and it's the same storytelling, planning, coming up with a script, run of show. So event planners, you got this. Your business is going to be fine. Just think about it as you got to make the food look good through the internet until we figure out another way to teleport it to their houses. So, this is a moment where you can really get creative, and we'll talk more about that later. But for now, that's the fun part. And that's the part where you kind of have to resist the urge with your team to start like going wild and collaborating and get ideas and brainstorms. It's just like, all right, we've made a decision. We know we're going to do something cool. Who's the first person we call? The board, right? Even if the board doesn't necessarily get to decide, they're going to feel some kind of way about this. They've been looking forward to the event. They've been working hard for you. So, it's one of those things where like you have to low key make them feel like they are deciding. Well, you know what I mean? So give them a recommendation to make it easy for them to buy in. All right. Now, volunteers are the other thing. A lot of my organizations have folks who are retired as their volunteers. This is a vulnerable community right now. So they're worried right now. They have you on their calendar. They're your volunteers. Get in touch with them and let them know that there are going to be really creative ways for them to plug in and galvanize support from home. Attendees, pin it for now, right? We move on to table captains. Table captains have been communicating with the external guests. Let them know that something's coming. Thank them for being with you and tell them to stand by. And then the really, really important one, we're actually going to talk about this in more detail later, is your sponsors. Now that your event is 2 weeks, 3 weeks away, you probably only have like 10% of that sponsor revenue in accounts receivable. You've already spent the money that they gave you. So don't come at it like, oh, are you still with us? This is where you have to really be confident, get on the phone with them, let them know that you so appreciate their support. And you're going to be excited about the fact that, you know what, we're actually going to leverage your logo and digital assets. And we think that we have a really strong way of communicating your support. So more on that a little bit later.
Okay. So you've got this pivot, and as Talia mentioned, communication, I actually can't overstate the importance of the messaging and communications about this right now. And you're going to have to take the right tone, which will be a balancing act between several considerations. So first is how you get the message out in the world. Like, certain stakeholders in your event need to hear from you personally, as Talia just said, and they need to hear that before the message gets out to the general public. You know, you can divide and conquer and have different staff members call board members, sponsors, table captains, whoever holds the relationships in question, before the word goes out to the public. The tone is also going to be a balance of confidence and optimism, because this is not the time to seem like you're panicking to donors, but with some transparency to, you know, balance it with some vulnerability and acknowledging the challenges that this presents. If we don't communicate the truth of our challenges to our donors, we miss an opportunity to motivate them to help us or go above and beyond what they had planned to do. You should also generally keep it short. Brevity is of the essence here. We don't want to get into long-winded explanations that might come off as defensive or panicked, but you do want to balance that with enough detail that your communication is going to satisfy most of the people who read it and not leave people feeling like there are obvious unanswered questions. And finally, you want to balance the communication of decisions that have been made with the fact that this is also an opportunity to gather input that might actually inform some of the specifics of how you are pivoting. So for example, we'll talk in another minute about virtual galas where table captains have their own peer-to-peer pages as a digital table. If your organization has never done peer-to-peer fundraising before and you kind of don't know what that looks and feels like internally or externally, you might want to pick up the phone and call your table captains and kind of explain that and ask them that if they're on board with it, with the right support from you. Because if they are not, that idea will not achieve liftoff. So we're going to talk now about some of the ways you can actually pivot. So we're going to start with what I'm calling standard virtual events. Imagine taking a breakfast or a luncheon where people are showing up and giving and trying to turn that into a virtual experience. It's not rocket science, but there are definitely some complexities and some best practices. So when you're taking an event like that into the digital realm, one of the things I really encourage you to do is have a campaign page that has a goal with a thermometer or some other kind of progress meter, to show where you are towards your goal. And the reason why is because there's something called the goal proximity effect, which means that the closer you are to your goal, the more people want to help you get there. It's so ironic. And so if you don't have a goal page with a thermometer of some kind, people don't have the context they need to see how their gift might actually move the needle and help put you over the top.
As Ariel walks through these steps in virtual events, I'm going to chime in with some budget-friendly alternatives. So if you can't afford a platform that has a digital thermometer, what I've done is I've used a whiteboard or a hand-drawn thing in order to draw the thermometer and just do it in real time. So I might have a photo of that to share, but I just want to throw out some of the, because we acknowledge that not everybody can afford these platforms right now.
Yep, a lot of them are really affordable. We will definitely give you guys some tools and technology recommendations in a minute.
Good point, and worth the investment, honestly.
Yep. So like a regular event, video and multimedia are going to be an important part of your storytelling and keeping people engaged. You want to highlight a matching gift if you have one. And if you don't, this might be an awesome time to ask your board to pool a match together. You definitely want to recognize your sponsors. And Talia, again, will talk a little bit more about sponsorship stuff. And also what I call gift level impacts, right? Like communicating, what does $250 accomplish? What does $1,000 gift support in terms of your programs? And finally, time frame. State a time frame for your virtual event, because urgency is a key component. If it seems indefinite, there's less motivation to give now. You know, if it's 1 day, 3 days, a week, whatever, just name it so there's context for that person.
So gift level impacts, for example, something really tangible, like $100 pays for one stipend for an intern, right? I'm just trying to think about a Teen Tix example or something. So, you know, really get like specific with that.
Yep. So,
without restricting the gift.
Exactly. You gotta use the will support things such as, so that you don't restrict the
There's
gifts.
a way.
Let's move on to defining what a virtual gala is. So when we use the phrase virtual gala, we are talking about really trying to reproduce the table captain focus events that many organizations do. So if your audience development strategy is really driven by table captains and board members sort of being influencers in their networks and bringing people in through their own table, this is a great strategy for you to investigate to see if everybody's on board with it. So what this looks like is you have a campaign page, just like we talked about with standard virtual events, that has, you know, all of those facets that we just talked about, but also we call that the mother page. And there's also child pages where the totals from those separate fundraising pages roll up into the bigger page and everything gets updated in real time. And so each table captain has their own, quote, you know, virtual table. You know, they share that with their networks. It's got their own personal goal. And really, you know, just like a live gala, it's your work with the table captains on audience development and reaching their networks that's going to be the most important thing here. And this is actually, I think, a way of getting regrets gifts when everything gets back to normal. There's no reason you kind of can't replicate this and create an evergreen strategy for gifts in lieu. Oh, you can't come to my table? Here's my virtual table link, right?
It's so true. From a live, like in-person events perspective, I have been like notoriously known, like my clients roll their eyes because every year I'll be like, can we like live stream it? And really like what they say to me is, oh, you know, I don't want to lose out on people showing up in the room. And I see it more as like, get them there because they want to be there. Feed less people if you can, make the same amount of money, and extend beyond the four walls of the Westin, for God's sakes. Like, you know, you've got this. Like, people want to be a part of it and people want to engage in the global community. So this is exciting.
Yeah, and this is a way to, as Talia said, to amplify the fact and really kind of give people a personal relationship to check into, like with their table captain, to bring them on board in that way. So the P2P virtual gala is a little bit more complicated to pull up. So why might you want to do it? So first of all, we're always telling our board and our table captains, like, bring your networks, organize your networks, galvanize your networks. But we rarely give them tools to do that. So these child pages, their personal pages, are actually a very concrete and visible and, most importantly, accountable tool for helping board and table captain efforts get organized and bringing in their networks. Internally, there's an upside to it where staff are going to have an easier time figuring out where to spend their time in order to raise the most money. Like, you'll be able to see, this table captain is struggling, this table captain's succeeding really well. Okay, let's go spend time supporting the table captain who's not making the most of things right now. It also will help you cut through the digital noise. So this is going to be a very noisy moment right now. It reminds me of Give Big, which, for those who don't live in Washington, is the statewide annual giving day that happens in May. And it is an email bonanza for weeks in advance. And donors who support multiple organizations could easily get overwhelmed by or like become desensitized to these asks. But imagine somebody getting an email from their best friend or a good colleague, inviting them to join a virtual table and support their favorite organization with their own reasons and their own goal attached. I am willing to bet that they will open that email first, and that is the power of peer-to-peer.
I think to that point around digital communications and email communications specifically, it's like Give Big, where everybody's also telling you about their new hygiene protocols. So press releases on top of appeals, on top of whatever, your family members, etc. So be clever about making sure that if you send something out from MailChimp, be cognizant of spam blockers. Forward it to somebody who you really want to make sure sees it, right? If you have 10 important major donors, make sure you're forwarding them everything from your personal email so it doesn't get caught in spam or a promotional tab.
Yes. So another upside of this is that we're going to come back to my nerd stuff, the goal proximity effect. The personal virtual table goals really magnify the potential of this goal proximity effect. So for example, let's say you are somebody who's going to a gala with $100,000 goal and your goal was to give $1,000, or your plan. That $1,000 doesn't seem like a huge piece of the pie to a $100,000 goal. But if you are giving in the context of your best friend's table goal, which is $5,000, all of a sudden that's 20% of the way to their goal, right? That will feel very, very different from a motivation perspective. And at heart, people act when they believe their action will move the needle. And you can make that movement of the needle so much more visible in the personal virtual table goal context. And honestly, this is also a cultivation move. This is going to help you cultivate your table captains, right? You're in a tough moment together. You're fighting for something together. They actually have a chance to help in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
And you have an opportunity to get to know them more, right? You're going to bond through this moment.
Yeah. A lot for my client who is dealing with this right now, a lot of people have reached out. Like some people are just like in Seattle, some people are working from home. I talked to my friend this morning and she was just like, I don't know what to do. Like operations have halted and there's some companies who are taking good care of their employees and then there's some people who are losing their jobs. So, just make sure that you're taking care of each other and know that people want to take care of you, right?
They do.
So we said that we were going to...
Oh, hold on.
Okay.
Because we have to cover this.
Oh, okay.
Before you commit to this virtual gala idea, right? There's all these upsides, but are your table captains on board? And if you don't know the answer to that, ask them, right? Are your supporters and your donors like generally comfortable with tech and online tools? And do they follow and engage with you? And is there someone inside your organization who has the capacity to put together like a toolkit for your table captains and really be the point person who's managing their experience and supporting them. When you are asking people to do something new or make any kind of change, the way you're going to succeed is if you make it blazingly easy for them to do the new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is really important. And if you don't have internal capacity, you might want to figure out how you get that internal capacity if you want to take advantage of this idea. And also, on the plus side, there might be volunteers or loyal donors that you have who don't like in-person events, but in this virtual scenario, they might be great table captain leaders.
That's a good point. And I think that like, as we were dealing with like some thoughts that, like we said, we're having continued thoughts and ideas on how to modify recommendations. I make a lot of table captain toolkits for my clients, right? I really specialize in audience development. And so I've been trying to make those a lot briefer.
Yeah.
Like a briefer.
Yeah.
A brief.
A brief.
A brief. Yeah, briefing. You know what I mean? Like what they really want is the ghost written email template to send out to folks. So
and technology instructions for setting up their page.
Word. And Autumn on the comments had a really good question. And by the way, on the comments, I was hoping to moderate, but I think we might have to do that differently. So if you are wondering why you're not being addressed, I don't know how to, but
we will get to it.
Okay.
Okay. So corporate sponsorships.
Oh, this really is one of those silver linings, honestly, because at the beginning of this conversation, my client was like, are they still like, we have to ask them, are they still going to give us the money? And I'm like, don't ask them that, like just reach out, get on the phone. You don't even have like your boilerplate messaging figured out yet at this point that you're getting on the phone. Okay. Like, remember we talked about like the order of operations before you're even implementing any communications, before the e-blast announcement goes out, get on the phone. Okay. Call them. I do this before I solicit sponsors, no matter what. I call them, I ask them, I let them know I'm getting ready to put a proposal in. I hope you're still open to that. We so appreciate this. I'm referring to renewals, by the way. Just want to check in on your benefits. Are you loving everything still? Is there something that you want in lieu? There's some folks who love coming to your event and putting the table together, and that's one of the real perks for them that they enjoy. There's some folks who really struggle getting the table together and would probably love to be presented with an alternative, like a team building event for their employees. I mean, don't you think, Ariel, that like corporate social responsibility is really moving in a direction where people are doing a lot for their employees, and corporations really are in a space where they know if they don't have a mission-driven element to what they do, they're going to be irrelevant soon.
Yeah. I mean, that's the future of corporate sponsorship for sure, right? They don't need your event as a way to get eyeballs on their logo. The internet has changed all of that. But what they want is to be able to create an opportunity so that their employees know they work for a place that does good in the world and that cares about that.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to a lot of different local Seattle tech companies who have reached out to my clients to say, do you need space? Do you need help hosting do you need a mobile hotspot? So, assume the best of them because they are your stakeholders and they're trying to take action and do something too. They're feeling powerless. And so you can really galvanize that feeling of powerlessness.
So another really important thing is to the transition to virtual is actually going to create new opportunities, right? Like you have all this new digital real estate, like Talia had a great idea about how to use some video. So not only can you do things like have your board and your table captains do public shout outs on social media to sponsors and thank them publicly for sticking with you.
It's so good.
Tell me again about the video idea you have with the ticker.
Well, this is something, so I'm overnight becoming a low key live streaming simulcasting expert. No big deal. It's been my dream. Just kidding. There is a way to do the lower third overlay, as you know, on screens. And so part of that technology is just built in. It's not hard. So most of your AV partners are going to be able to offer that without any hesitation. You already have the logos, you already have the digital assets. They can even put in, slides actually and have different content. You have a slide go up, text to give. We'll talk more about that later, but text to give is a great way to get people, giving in a way that makes less web friction, less clicks, and, just making it easy. So a little bit of a digression, but again, assume the best. And know that you have a lot of opportunities to leverage these digital assets in the future, right? So events, one of the most, it's like a mandala, an event. It's ephemeral. It's it happens and you're all there and you experience the same thing. And then you go home and you have the photos you have, but the magic of being there will never be different. Again, shout out to the event planners. There is no replacing a gathering of people together, and I will die on that hill, frankly. So that is a thing. It's not a thing right now, but it is also true that digital assets have a longer shelf life, and if you're doing a live stream, if you're simulcasting, if you're putting out video content, if you're doing that stuff lives in perpetuity as long as it's still relevant, right? As long as it ages well on your socials, on your website, on wherever.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, we're going to move on to probably a hot take topic, but I wanted to note that we know we're behind a little bit because Talia and I have difficulty reining in our evident passion about this topic. But just know that if you have to leave exactly at 11:30, no worries, we're going to be sending out the slides and videos, but also we're going to keep going and cover a lot more and still do a Q&A, and we'll hang on with you guys as long as you want us to. Take it away, Talia.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is really helpful for me too, and just I'm doing it as much for myself as you guys, because then I turn around and have to scramble in the background to get things done by the 24th of March. There's a lot of money to raise. So some of you guys do auctions, and without being really negative, I just want to be straight up with you guys about how I feel about it, and also acknowledge the fact that I wouldn't be an event planner if it weren't for Kirkland Art Center's. Shout out to Kirkland, where this whole thing began, honestly, and where my whole career in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest began. Ariel and I are both from the East Coast, by the way, for any of you East Coast folks. So essentially, what I'm really feeling about auctions is that you have to pivot away from them. And I give my clients that advice regardless of the current climate that exists. So I'm not saying that I'm all for canceling, auctions, but they are really hard on staff. They are resource intensive, and therefore they are not giving you the most bang for your buck. And it's another thing that I've really done the analysis, I've done the work, and I've invested in a lot of partnerships with organizations where if we reduce the amount of auction items, which Ariel and I also refer to as transactional revenue in their event, we see the raise the paddle, which we also refer to as philanthropic revenue, go up. So it's the riskiest way to fundraise. It's really hard. They're resource intensive. Investing in an online platform for an auction is going to be costly and brutal. And honestly, Ariel knows I could go on and on about this. And also sometimes I get a little bit heated. So I think we could put a pin in it for now and make sure that we really provide I'll put a white paper out just in terms of
Yeah.
like, I don't know if Alex Martin is on the line, but she and I wanted to collaborate on this a while ago.
Awesome. So we know that you may not have a choice. Some of you are in a position right now where you have to pivot to an online auction.
Yeah.
We get it. In that case, my recommendation is to reduce the online auction to the highest ROI items, right? Like you probably have data from past events to inform that. You know, look at the fair market value, look at the kind of yield you're getting on these items, because it's actually a lot of work to take an auction fully virtual. And you really just want to be careful and cognizant of making the absolute most of your time. You can actually repurpose procured items, like save them for next year, or use them as ways to create gifts or incentives as stewardship or, you know, cultivation for making gifts happen. And, you know, if you really want to get deep in the weeds on this, give Talia a holler.
Thanks for taking the mic. My blood pressure was going up, you guys. Shout out if you're doing an auction though. It's again, I wouldn't have a career in this field if it weren't for the auction model. And auctions there also are more auctions in Seattle per capita than anywhere else. So for those of you wondering why it's such a thing, it's because it's a thing.
It's a thing here in Seattle for sure.
All right. So what really excites me about all of this, obviously, I think I've said a lot about it already, is that there's ways that you could be really creative. I'm also an artist by trade, a visual artist, and Ariel is as well. So a performance realm artist. So I think that if you are a person who loves ideas, this is going to be fun for you. So we wanted to come up with a couple of ideas. One is rooted in, like I said, that solid ground shout out, real-time example that I'm working on right now. What we're doing there and what a lot of the Seattle community is doing, shout out to Arts Corp, is a streaming variety show / streaming simulcast format of content. I'm not going to get into the technical things. If you have questions, you can ask me, but there are a lot of different ways and different levels of investment from like 0 to 20,000 that you can do this, right? It's possible, it's going to work, and it's going to be awesome. So this really would work for people who are like, I've invested in this keynote speaker, and let's say they're local or something. You don't want to back out. They're still involved. Yeah. Take what that collaboration was, take that content, turn it into your appeal, your content. Ariel's going to talk more about the technology, but text to give, things that have audience engagement elements where people are tuning in and able to give in real time is essentially what this format is, right?
Without too much detail, Talia, tell them what Solid Ground decided to do.
Solid Ground is, so we're partnering with a local chef and really timely because Seattle restaurants are literally really taking a big hit out of all of the industries. This is where I'm seeing the most hurting folks. So we're partnering with Chef Eduardo Jordan, and he's agreed to do a cooking show. So part of our unique twist on this event was that the Sheridan was willing to produce a meal that he collaborated to create with a kids workshop at Solid Ground Sandpoint campus. And so what we're doing is we're going to have that meal that the Sheridan was going to prepare, that's Chef Jordan's recipe, be part of a cooking show. And we're going to, have a whole bunch of different content. We're planning it now. We've had lots of stuff. And so I can link you to that live stream if you want to see what Solid Ground is doing, what I'm doing.
Well, they're also doing something else that we have on the slide, which is leveraging assets, right? They had this great cookbook.
That's true.
And now that's going to be sent out, as a perk for giving at a certain level. And in fact, I think you even mentioned them.
Donor incentive. Like we had already had this cookbook that has like all kinds of recipes and talks about our collaboration with chefs. So we were going to leverage 300 plus gifts. Now we're not sure what, but we have this asset ready to go. So another example of something you already did that you can just repurpose and allow it to be inventive. So utilize your existing program. We've already talked about leverage assets, and we've already talked about transactional things. And Ariel and I both feel some kind of way about tchotchkes or like plastic landfill type stuff like it. But I'm not like saying you can't ever do that. Like I would be a hypocrite if I said I didn't like a tchotchke. I mean, my art is basically fine tchotchke at this point. But for me, like we do have a lot of really unique, fun stuff planned, and I'm sure you guys do too. And there's one really brief anecdote from a former client that Ariel and I worked on together. It's Women's Funding Alliance, who had an art and dining auction, and during the Raise the Paddle, we decided to incentivize $1,000 gifts by the not Captain America, the lady version.
Wonder Woman
movie had just come out. And so we got these Wonder Woman slap bracelets, and shout out to Leslie Wallace. And as they were Fed Northrop, local auctioneer, who's all over the country, actually like had the MC slap the slap bracelets on when they raised the paddle. And so like it was a record-breaking $1,000 level giving moment,
Yep.
you know. Shout out to Kristen Spangler too, by the way.
And you can make those moments digital, right? It might involve sending things through the mail. It might, but you can still use that even though it's not happening live. Get really creative. There's one other thing you could do. I mean, some organizations have done really creative kind of 24-hour fundraising-a-thons. You know, I know Talia participated in one.
Tell them about On the Boards first, because I feel like On the Boards
they really did a great job. So 2 examples, On the Boards, which runs an amazing online video platform called On the Boards TV, where you can see contemporary performances that, you know, are really hard to find otherwise. They do like a 24-hour fundraising marathon where they continually live stream these performances, you know, and have, you know, moments in between with the staff, but it works great and it's fun and it's so mission centric. The other, you know, Talia was part of one for the Center on Contemporary Art, where she did like a 24-hour art creation challenge. And that's just kind of an example of a way to sort of not a true publicity stunt, but do something that grabs people's attention, but that also really actually reflects your mission.
It aligns well with the urgency that Ariel's going to talk about related to just how you build a campaign that's successful, because anything that's happening on a day that is time sensitive and a spectacle lends really well to online
I love
campaigns.
Me some spectacle. Okay. So we are going to talk now about the opposite of creative, technology. Just kidding. This is a really important part of this, and we won't spend too much time. But if you are having a general virtual event or a virtual gala or an online auction, you're going to need tools that match the structure of how you're trying to bring in revenue there. So many of you are probably already using some of the standard virtual event tools because they're really basically general online giving platforms that you can really create more content around and make it feel like a virtual event. Some folks are using tools that are native to their database. So if you have Little Green Light or Bloomerang, which are both great programs, they have built-in giving page capacity, but those pages are probably not sophisticated enough for a virtual event. Like you can't really put video on them. Some more complex tools, you can do that. But I think, you know, if you have one of those more bare bones built-in ones, I think you need to go for a different tool. And if you're doing the virtual gala, the peer-to-peer, you need a tool that actually specializes in that. They don't all have that as an aspect, although it's much more popular now. And so we've listed some good ones there. And don't worry, you guys are going to get slides and have access to video. But if you want to screen cap this now because you want to make a decision today, go for it. This is a good time. And of course, the most complicated is the online auction, but there is no dearth of tools and platforms available for that. And we've listed a couple of examples there too. So while we are really thinking about the virtual space, and I did see some comments come across the chat in it, so I'm glad we are addressing it. You're going primarily digital, but there are audiences that you have that maybe aren't going to make that shift with you, whether it's based on demographics or perhaps having accessibility issues, you know, going online. So event donors in an older demographic need love too, or anybody who's not super plugged in virtually. So as you do this virtual event, you know, you might actually be able to reach out another way to somebody who often comes to your event but isn't a power user, right? Check in with those folks and encourage or solicit them to, you know, maybe just give via your regular website or even send a check in the mail, use the phone, etc. So we're going to blaze through now what I'm calling everything else. We're going to think about how the current situation will affect other aspects of your fundraising efforts. And we're going to cover this big picture, what factors you should consider. Donor retention, online and social media, monthly giving. Again, we're focused on individual giving here because it's the biggest opportunity you have in the area where you can actually exert real influence in a way that's going to change course of revenue in real time now. So real talk about the big picture. This is going to be a tough year. And stocks are volatile, individuals will be affected, businesses of all size will be affected, foundations are affected. It's not great. And so a lot of what we are going to talk about and cover is meant to help you respond to this new reality, right? And connected back to the issue of pivoting versus postponing, this is all about what you're going to be doing for the rest of the year. Imagine if you postponed your event through June or September and you were trying to do event stuff continually over the same period of time you're trying to do everything else. Like, you really can't afford to compromise the rest of your year with event mania. One thing I suggest is to throw a quick and dirty survey out to your donors, because if we are entering a new world where we're going to be communicating in new ways and maybe don't have access to some of our usual ways, I don't think we should make assumptions about what the best ways to do that are. I think you should ask your donors. So you can do something quick and easy. Definitely ask them when, how, and what they want to hear from you, right? It might not just be your regular old digital e-news. And if you're bold, ask them how they like to give, why they give, like gather some intel right now about why people feel passionate about you. So you can kind of recycle that messaging and really incorporate it and really speak to them directly. And do they anticipate changing their giving? I mean, those kind of insights can really help inform some of the decisions you're going to make. You can make this anonymous so people feel comfortable telling you what's really up. If you've ever been to one of my workshops before, you know that I love retention and stewardship, and I just think it's a hugely important part of fundraising in general. It is more important than ever. So in times of economic downturn, you lean into the donors you have who have shown you over and over again that they believe in you and the work that you do, that will bear the absolute most fruit. That is what worked in the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. So after any of this initial crisis management, like pivoting your event into virtual, retention is the thing to invest in. I am not suggesting stopping acquisition work, but retention is cheaper. And if you do it well, when you need to go for your donors with an ask, they're more likely to say yes.
Same with corporate too. Renewals are the lowest hanging fruit.
Yep. So a couple suggestions about stewardship. There's some classics that will never go out of style, right? Phone calls to folks, handwritten notes, whether they're thank you notes or Talia's favorite, birthday cards.
Put your major donors' birthdays in your calendar right now.
Or in your database, even better.
In your database and your Outlook or your Gmail or whatever your work calendar is.
That kind of personal touch is going to get noticed in a time like this, especially when most people are pivoting to digital stuff because it's easy to do en masse and cheaper, et cetera. Analog things make a greater impact than ever, ironically. So you could do hard copy newsletters or postcards with a single impact story, right? Also, profile your donors. This is a moment where you want to show the community who is stepping up. We want to influence them. We want to put some peer pressure on them in a subtle way. So putting a profile of a donor together, whether it's a digital newsletter or a hard copy newsletter, that is basically sharing why they think you matter so much and why they give, can actually be hugely influential. Some newer ideas that are more virtual, right? Using virtual tools to connect with donors one-on-one. There's lots of tools like Zoom out there that allow you to have video face-to-face conversations, either en masse or one-on-one. A friend of mine who wrote in a question who's on this webinar, he runs a large development shop full of major gift officers who travel most of the time. And his question to me was, how do I keep these folks productive when we've just had to cancel all of our travel plans? And I think that using virtual tools to continue to engage with donors is the way to do it. I mean, everybody's getting used to the fact that you're having Zoom meetings now, you're having video meetings or calls. It's not going to seem weird. It's part of the new normal as long as we're in this situation. You can also live stream video updates from the field. Have a program person bring their phone into the field and highlight what your impact is and what you're doing and put that on Facebook or record it and put it on YouTube. And you can use, you can have group briefings too. If you're an advocacy organization and part of what you do is make sure that you're briefing community leaders on work or situations that are evolving, you can use digital tools for that too. There's one tool I want to mention in particular, which is called ThankView. I'm sort of skeptical generally about kind of one purpose tools, but I just became aware of this, and it's a really neat and interesting way to send personalized video messages to supporters. They can respond to you. You can actually insert a giving link. It's really neat, and I think that this could be a great way to really use video and stay connected in a personal way, and really just connect with people.
ThankView.
Yes, ThankView.
Can't wait to check that out.
And in general, you want to take a multi-channel approach to this. It's a mix Your retention practice is a mix of digital and analog tactics, and it's calibrated to different segments based on the demographics and patterns of engagement you see in your donors. Another moment of real talk. This is the year that you are going to have to get good at online giving and mobile giving, right? This is our greatest opportunity right now to reach people en masse. It's the most nimble thing you can do. You know, you need flexibility in this moment. You need the ability to reach people quickly. So, you know, giving on these channels has grown year over year as well, including mobile. People are becoming much more comfortable with staying in touch with nonprofits and businesses via text and with giving through it too.
And social media we'll talk about too, but like whose mom isn't like texting them every emoji like all day, and also like on Facebook saying like love mom in their comments.
My mom is. Also email. Do not forget email, because optimized email, where you're really, you know, segmenting well, great subject lines, best practices of donor communications, and kind of the visuals of an email. When you do that well, it has the highest ROI of any digital tactic, right? About $40 return for every dollar that you spend on it. Yeah. So build your list, right? Cross-pollinate with social. Make sure the social people know, you know, you promote your email list and try to get everybody on both channels so that they don't miss what you're putting out, and create a welcome series. This, I think, could really help right now, because you can kind of set it and forget it. It's like the Ronco rotisserie grill of retention strategies, right? When somebody signs up for your email list, you know, they'll get a welcome email, and then they'll get an email that, you know, directs them to key parts of your website to highlight what you're doing, or maybe, you know, a message from your CEO about how you're addressing challenges in time.
Everything.
Right. And then maybe the next one is a strategic gift ask, or a low monthly giving ask, or something like that. I also just want to note that text messages have the highest open rate, right? People aren't always in text, right? They're not always in front of their computers, but how many people do you know, like, pretty much always have their phone in their pocket or right next to them? I'm guilty of that. You can take advantage of that, right? And people will let you know or unsubscribe if they feel like that's too invasive, but you need to get in front of people right now. This is a great way.
Elizabeth Warren's still texting me with good plans, by the way.
I should do that. And finally, you probably already have the tools you need for this. A lot of the technology tools we just looked at in terms of events, they're actually comprehensive platforms. Many of them offer really interesting ways to raise funds online, whether it's like a digital roundup of where a donor can sign up their credit card and have every purchase, you know, round up to $1 and the difference goes to you. That's a product called Harness that I just heard about. And it, like ThankView, I normally kind of don't shout out single products.
Yeah, but hashtag not sponsored, by the way.
They're not sponsored. I'm
none
giving
of these people are. We're just like nerds.
Well, that's why this is real talk, because I'm giving you my real opinion. So again, you may not have to actually make an additional investment of too much, and go investigate the tools you have for what they can do. So there is a piece of this that I want Talia to talk about, because she's better at it than me.
Social media. And in fact, we just created a Instagram account, and we're going to really try to dedicate that to like both keeping in touch with you guys, but also sharing really good examples of social media. It's kind of hard to like describe things in visual communications that are good without showing examples. And like we said, we kind of like threw this thing together real quick. So I would love to be able to keep the conversation going, and also take the opportunity to give shout outs to people who are doing things really well. As much as we can collaborate and do that together, the better we're going to be, right? We lift each other up in this really tough time, right? There's room for everyone to be successful. So, you know, that's really the culture, I think, of social media. Honestly, I think a lot of people criticize, and there's a lot of bad things about it. But I think there's also in a lot of community spaces, a lot of ways that people are doing really robust activism. My entire art practice is documented on Instagram. It's my means of sharing what I do. And so for me, I think the biggest thing that Ariel and I talked about around this, in terms of like, if you're not really doing it yet, just focus on like 1 or 2 platforms that you think you can do really well. And if that means that you have to choose if you're the person who's going to be the administrator for the account and you like don't know how to do Twitter, do the one, like just do Instagram, right? Do what you're comfortable with, because you're gonna be able to do it faster, right? So don't overwhelm yourself.
Consistency is the most important thing, right?
Well, consistency is the most important thing, because there's nothing worse than like a Twitter account. Like if you go to my Twitter right now, don't go. It's like there hasn't been a post since like 2017.
Mine too.
Yeah. So choose the right platforms, and, don't rely on it for solicitation. Social media functions really well in a cultivation and stewardship capacity. And there are a lot of features that come out in a lot of really good ways for online campaigns, but don't necessarily start soliciting all the time, right? If you go to someone's page, for instance, who's not doing social media well in the nonprofit fundraising space, their page basically looks like, come to this, donate to this. Here's something we did. I did this.
It's all taking, not giving. You need to give.
Exactly.
And to Talia's point, like engagement is where social media does best in this whole kind of multi-channel fundraising effort, right? There's a lot of data that shows that clicks that come from email turn into clicks that are turn into donations at a much higher rate than clicks from social. But social is great for reinforcing the message, for showing amazing examples of programs in action.
Yeah.
You're creating an ecosystem, and this is important because digital natives are the next generation of philanthropy. You have to cultivate them now and get better at this. Real talk, this is not optional anymore. You're gonna lose ground if you don't make strides on this right now, because with social distancing in place, people need it more than ever too.
And I'm seeing a lot of good questions about how do we support our constituency who are our elders, who are not necessarily the digital natives, who need the extra support for instructions online. And that is a very pressing real-time, like right now thing. But in this moment where we're kind of trying to look forward thinking, it really will be in 10 years that, this is the digital natives are going to be the people that are adulting, right? So whatever that means, they have the wealth, they have the capacity, they're your donors who are growing up, who are making more money, who are doing their thing out there in the world. And so know that, as weird as it is, a millennial will be someone's grandma someday.
Speaking of millennials, we're going to talk about monthly giving. And if you've ever been to one of my other workshops, you will know that I am a stan for monthly giving. I firmly believe that every nonprofit, or almost every nonprofit, should be doing this. And I do believe this is an important part of strategy as you go through this year. Not necessarily for immediate cash flow. So one thing I want to say up front is, if you are in a difficult cash flow position, if you need money now, raise it through one-time gifts. But this can be an amazing follow-up strategy for retention once you have your immediate needs met. And if you're not in a cash flow difficult place, you might think about spending some time on this right now. So here's why I want you to think about monthly giving. So first of all, we want to create a comparable giving experience that is competitive with what is going on with folks in their normal lives around them. Everything is subscription-based these days. Netflix, all these services, products. I get my razors in the mail through a subscription service. So we're not keeping up as a sector with that, and we actually can. And it's a proven tactic. For new donors, monthly giving has a way higher year-over-year retention rate than people who are making one-time gifts. They have a higher annual value and a higher lifetime value than people making one-time gifts. And they do give to other campaigns. It's not like somebody signs up for monthly and says, great, I'm never going to give to you again. They are actually more likely to give to crowdfunding campaigns or special initiative campaigns or come to an event. And boomers and millennials love monthly giving. How many other things in life can you say that about right now?
Maybe like Cheez-Its.
Or the Trader Joe's version of them. So let me give you a few tips. So ask relatively soon after someone makes a one-time gift. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. You kind of want to ride the energy of them feeling good about themselves because they did something awesome, AKA give to you. Calibrating a relevant ask is also important. So if somebody's giving you $50, ask them for $5 a month. If it's 100, ask for 10, etc. You'll be raising 20% more from these folks, but it will actually feel less of a burden on their wallet in real time. I also suggest that you make a brand, give something or a circle, right? Give something people to feel a part of. So for Charity Water, theirs is Pipeline. For Habitat for Humanity, theirs is the Builders, which makes perfect sense for them. I'm on the board of a local organization called Teen Tix, which is all about youth arts engagement. And our monthly giving club is the Honor Society. And I got a diploma in the mail that was fun and amazing when I signed up for it, in sort of recognition of that. So there's going to be a version of that will work for your mission. Don't be afraid to get creative. And don't stop talking to these people once you've got their monthly gift. In fact, talk to them more, because you are in that beautiful and juicy part of the fundraising cycle. Well, it's all engagement and stewarding, right? And so I think don't stop interacting with them. Don't take for granted that they have signed up for a recurring gift with you.
The naming conventions don't have to be like mission specific either. Like South Seattle Emerald is a local online newspaper in Seattle, and their monthly giving circle is called the Rainmakers, which is a little Seattle.
Oh, I like
take.
that.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. One more set of real talk, maybe two. Don't forget phone and mail. We've talked a lot about digital and virtual, but again, I saw some comments come through, people worried about connecting with folks who are not big on digital. So do not forget our classic tools in this time. And especially with quarantines and social distancing, your donors might actually love hearing from you by phone. We're all kind of in our houses with, not a lot of social contact right now. And remember that direct mail is not dead. Rumors of its death are greatly exaggerated. You just have to find the right segment, right? This is a great thing to use when you know who to send it to. And it is particularly effective still for acquisition and for retention among an older demographic. Just don't lick the envelope.
Yeah.
And maybe make a joke about that on the front,
because
people are
tell
nervous.
Them about your idea. That was our idea to put the that like on your actual envelope.
Yeah, so
if it matches your vibe.
That's called a lift line. And actually putting little text like that on the front of a direct mail envelope is one of the tricks you can use to increase how many people open it. Like the job of an envelope is to get opened. And that's one of the ways you can do it. And I actually think that, don't use levity inappropriately, but people are actually, I've seen people online going, is it safe to touch my mail? Is it safe to open my mail? Generally, yes. But I think you could make a joke like, don't worry, we didn't lick this, or something like that.
I love it. But
if it works for your mission and your tone.
I veer towards the whimsical.
And this one is for the EDs and other leaders on the call with us today. You're going to need a contingency plan, and you need it now, even if you don't think you're going to have to act on it now, right? You've got to get your exec, your program, your finance, your development leaders, and everybody's got to be part of making this collaboratively. If you have to make cuts, don't only cut fundraising and start a vicious cycle, right? Don't knock out the legs of the stool that you expect programs to sit on. Cutting fundraising can lead to less program funds. Less program funds means less program activity. Less program activity gives you less to communicate to donors, because really fundraising depends on you showing the impact to the people who care. So you can start a vicious cycle by cutting fundraising too much right now. And, that is tempting from a budgetary short-term perspective, but it is not smart in the long run. Many of you are in budget season right now. You have a year end of June 30, and you're making your plan for your next fiscal year. This is the time to be conservative, right? This is, I hate to say it, not the year to dream big and do tons of new stuff. We don't know what is happening, and it is our responsibility to the people we serve, the people you serve as an organization, to be conservative and maintain the stability of your organization.
This is important, you guys. I mean, even since we had this discussion yesterday, it feels like more of a moment. So just really don't stress yourself out, but just take action.
Yep. And there's one really specific reason that I will tell you about why you need to be budgeting conservatively right now, because it's a seller's market for development staff, right? We have our pick and choose of where we want to go work. There's more organizations who need fundraising and good fundraisers than the supply. So smart and talented development staff, they will leave their positions before they fail, because they've been set up to fail with unreasonable goals or budgets made by folks in denial, right? And staff turnover is the #1 killer of fundraising revenue. You are to avoid it at all costs. And none of the strategies we've covered today will make a bit of difference if there is no one around to execute it and support your volunteers and board members in helping to do that. Now, we are optimists at heart, so we're going to end with silver linings. One silver lining of this in my mind is you're going to end up being really awesome at online and mobile giving, right? We wish we weren't in this place, but think of this as a deposit that's going to bear compound interest for you forever in terms of the lifetime value of the donors you're going to pick up and upgrade, et cetera, through these kind of tactics.
We have a new evergreen strategy for gifts and virtual communications. I think that it's with my clients a lot, and especially specializing in audience development, anything that could make that easier and more fun, you know what I mean? Facebook groups, things, online forums and communities, things that people are already participating in. Now we're getting a chance to potty train people, for lack of a better term, in order to really understand how to communicate in this space. And I think there's a chance that we might be able to galvanize support around,
Agreed.
you know, planning and communications and getting people registered. So
Yep.
I'm pumped about that. Like for me, being a table captain has never been rocket science. And so sometimes I really struggle, honestly.
Yeah.
Talk.
Okay. Another silver lining is that you will pick up the phone more. You know, this is something that modern fundraising seems to have sort of left behind in the virtual dust, but it's really effective and it's something you should be doing. And it's one of your only options for really personal touch right now. And again, Talia and I both agree, although she's a little bit more heated about it, that this is actually a moment where if you have an auction as a primary tool, it might be possible from this point out that this is a starting point for you to put your auction on the path to a less stressful, less transactional, more relationship-focused strategy.
And I mean, I think that, like I said, I cut my teeth with auctions. I think that they have their place, but I think that the biggest point that I didn't make earlier when we were speaking about this is that, you know, the problem is if you make a lot of money in your auction and keep budgeting higher the next year and try to hit a higher goal, all of a sudden you're creating a really problematic revenue model, right? It just should have sat at the realistic space that it was and been a reliable revenue model. It's not something that you can keep increasing even if you did really well, right?
Yep.
It's risky, it's not reliable, and it's unpredictable and hard.
Okay, so we're gonna head into the Q&A now. We want you to stay in touch with us. So just want to leave this up on the screen while we do Q&A. This is the basic contact info for both of us. You can see Talia's art on her Instagram. This is our Instagram handle for to follow us on Instagram, where we're hopefully going to be sharing out some great content and ideas and social strategy. And on my website, I just put up a new opportunity for folks to continue to work with me to bring me into solving problems in this difficult moment. So I will right now go through a couple questions we got in advance through that form I sent out to you guys, while Talia looks at the chat and make sure that we're staying on top of questions that
I've got
have
one
come up
in
within
the
real
queue.
time.
Autumn, shout out to Autumn, who's just like, Autumn and I have a great thing going on the chat. Or maybe that's the only thing I have going on the chat right now. But I really appreciate the question because I'm kind of in the midst of this right now, in terms of the question being, what if you don't do the table host platform, or what if you're, what if table captains in that whole audience development tactic, right, is not your strength, right, as an organization? That's okay. I think that this is where you really rely on signal boosts, those sponsor shout outs that Ariel mentioned before, like your constituency, you know, ask people who are influencers out there to repost your link, contact people that you never would have contacted, appeal to their hearts, right? People, even national celebrities, are in a space that you can ask them to do something for you. So you have to be creative, and I think you just have to make it your priority to, if you're doing something that's digital on the day of your event, really get the word out to everyone, right?
Yep.
You might not feel like you have those constituents who are your amplifiers, but you have your staff, you have your community, and you have people who will share. So ask anyone and everyone to share what you're doing.
Yes.
And you might actually pick up some people like your family. If you're a transplant, live in another city, you know, all of a sudden people who wouldn't normally give to your organization are like connected.
Yeah. Just a note, guys, the Q&A functionality isn't working. I'm clicking it and it's giving me nothing. So if you submitted a question through that, go ahead and submit it through the normal chat channel. I'm going to answer a question we got in advance, which is recommendations for monthly giving campaign platforms. And really a lot of the same ones we've already talked about have that functionality built in. What I will say is, importantly, when you're thinking about a platform for monthly giving, try to make it one where the donor can have their own login and manage their credit card situation, et cetera, because that's really going to increase the chances that when somebody's credit card expires, they're not just going to be like, guess I'll stop giving. Another one that I got is somebody who asked, with the unknowns or sort of crisis of the virus and the economy, it seems tone deaf to be asking for contributions. What are your thoughts? And I want to push back on that because I think the nonprofit sector, like we are guardians of all the stuff that needs to happen to help people that the government can't do. Government is playing its role right now to whatever degree based on what state you're in. I'm really happy to be in Washington State right now. We have great public health and our governor is proactive. But we are solving real problems in real time that are just made worse by this situation. And if you do not step up, claim the impact you're having, and tell the world why it's more important than ever, you're going to be failing the people you're serving. So I feel really passionate about that.
Ariel and I work with a lot of social justice organizations, and in that space, it's becoming more and more common that we have equitable ticketing structures where we ask people to think about what they can afford, and if they can afford more, pay more and underwrite for somebody who wants to be there who might not necessarily be able to afford it. So at this point, it might be worth looking at how some of that language looks so that you can, not in an inappropriate way, but in an authentic way, ask people to really center themselves around their privilege. What can you do right now? What can you do later? And what can you do in order to create an opportunity for someone else?
Awesome. Is it realistic to think that we'll be able to raise a lot of money from non-events in this current climate? Are there going to be too many other nonprofits also trying to raise money and too few people with disposable income? So number one, there's always, no, I think I do.
It's unprecedented.
There are always going to be like too many nonprofits also trying to raise money. That fact exists with or without coronavirus. But I do think
it's a really good point.
And also, I don't think there's very few people with disposable income. It's definitely a different situation for certain people, especially if they're self-employed right now. But
they're looking at the Dow.
You need to see the opportunity though. And I do think it is realistic to raise money. A lot of you do not have a choice because of your cash flow needs for spring and summer programs. And I just want to encourage you, we've looked at a couple of these types of questions now. This isn't the time to put your tail between your legs. It is the time to exert leadership, whether it's internally or externally in your organization or with your donors, and help lead the charge of how we are all fixing this together.
Love it. I don't have one teed up, but
Okay.
I can look.
We have decided to push our annual fundraiser, typically held in May, back to June. But is it even worth moving forward with that event? How do we secure sponsorships and ticket sales during this crisis? So I would say from this point out, just a little background on where we think coronavirus is headed in Seattle right now. And of course, other communities, you'll be lagging a little behind us in terms of when this happens to you. But something I read recently from an epidemiologist at Fred Hutch, which is one of our local medical institutions, he said on March 1st, Seattle was where Wuhan was on January 1st. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And they actually predict that at the current rate, we might see 60,000 cases of coronavirus in Seattle by May. So in my mind, May, June kind of doesn't matter. Spring event season is off. Whoever asked this question, it is real talk.
It's canceled.
Whoever asked this question, you got to do a pivot and look to some of Talia's strategies that she mentioned about getting creative because it's virtual, et cetera, and harnessing your ambassadors to help shout out that corporation for still sponsoring you, et cetera.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
If a client were to come to me and say, in Seattle or anywhere in the country right now, our event is in May, can you help us produce this? I would say, not unless it's going to be virtual. And I would walk away from that business at this juncture because I don't do anything that I don't think is a good idea. And I don't do anything that I don't think is going to be revenue driven if it's a fundraising event, which is, like I said, what I specialize in. So, I'm saying this just so that I can show you that I have some skin in the game here. Like, I don't think my gut is telling me that you just have to embrace this shift in this moment. And I think it's an opportunity to get better at visual communications and digital media. And I think once this blows over, things will restore to normalcy and you'll be an organization that's better at social, digital, and visual communications.
All right, we just got a question. What are your thoughts on a June event in California?
Is that my Anna Miller bestie from Buffalo? I don't know. There could be a lot of Anna Millers.
Could be a common name. Thoughts on a June event? Thanks for responding to that. June event in California. This is surging pretty quickly in California. I feel like you guys are not far behind Seattle being in that same boat. And also the optics right now of being like, hey, we're going to do an event. It's just not good. You appear irresponsible to the public to be putting on new events right now in light of all of this.
Yeah. We're looking at your comments in real time now, just
Yep.
because we're improvising. The donor appreciation event, that's an easy conversion to digital. I'm thinking you can do a fun, like if you don't have a budget, or if you do have a budget, like repurpose your budget to, you know, to do something that's like a video, like a cute, like take on, like you could do, you know, a spoof on The Office. Have fun with it, you know. Have all the have all the staff record something by way of thank you and acknowledgement, and just text it to your donors if you got it like that. If you don't got it like that with texting donors, by the way, ask them if they're text friendly. I text donors all the time. It's not like people are people, and people like texting, honestly.
They do. Okay, we got another question. What about a September event? So here's another piece of real talk.
I'm working on a September event.
Yeah. If you are planning a September event or a fall event, a lot of you have fall events. Right now, you should be this is where you carry on and say, okay, we're going to act like this event is going to happen. But you need to be making your plan A, B, and C right along with that main plan and hope that you don't have to use it.
Yeah.
Here is the reason. Because they expect that coronavirus will likely make a resurgence in the Northern Hemisphere in the fall. They expect it to kind of recede in the summer because the virus doesn't do well in hot weather. It's kind of like the flu. That's the pattern with the flu.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good chance that we could be having this conversation all over again in September. So I just want to name that. That's another reason I don't want people to kick the can down the field and go, great, we'll take our April event and make it September.
Mm-hmm.
You are actually jeopardizing, I think, the event even more. And you're actually making it more likely you will never get any money in this year from those donors.
That's right.
I
always have client, like sometimes I am trying a contingency plan, especially with these outdoor events, like I said, where force majeure is top of mind, because Seattle's weather is kind of dicey.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to think ahead of the curve, because you really do have to understand it's a risk. Events are a risky way of fundraising. We're not saying you shouldn't do it. I would never say you should do it. This is my business, right? But always have a contingency plan no matter what, even when life restores to normalcy, right? Mm-hmm. Do not get caught without a plan. And that's just good life advice, honestly.
Yep. All right, Camille submitted a question. Any thoughts on giving days? So just so you know, this is Camille from 501 Commons, who helps put on Give Big, which if you're in Washington or Seattle, you know is our annual day of giving every year. And my thoughts on giving days in this are that, I mean, you want to be cognizant of, your reliance on Give Big. If you run a big Give Big campaign, you raise a lot of money through that, pivoting to a virtual event a month before that or 2 months before that, just make sure you're looking at the overlap in those donors. It may be that your Giving Day participants are really different than your event donors, et cetera. It may be that they are a bunch of people who love to give to you through both things, and I wouldn't take the opportunity away for them to give to you through both things. I do think in general, to give a shout out to Give Big, that it's, for many organizations, has become a really huge part of what they do. And I also want to name that Give Big started the advent of Seattle nonprofits getting really good at online fundraising. That was 2011. Totally. And some organizations were doing it then, but it gave Seattle nonprofits a reason to get good. There was, big sponsorship match and all that jazz. And I think we're in another moment right now where we're all going to be forced or have a real incentive to get good at it.
And you know what works about that? With the Give Big, and what we don't have the luxury of right now is that we don't have a Giving Day. We don't have Give Big. We don't have Giving Tuesday. We don't have a thing building up, but what you do have are your events, right? So what works about Giving Days and Give Big is that together we're stronger. So to Anna's follow-up question about, I feel like everybody's going to postpone to September. The reason why we felt this pressing urgency to get out there and talk to the community in whatever way we could is because we're not encouraging people to postpone. It's not probably a good idea for your revenue, and you're going to get into a thing where you're competing in a time of year where your donors might already have organizations that they support. I mean, if you're really seriously considering postponing, call your however many major donors that probably make up 85% of your event revenue and find out if the date is available and get it on their calendars before you do anything, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question from Ben McCarthy. By the way, Ben is an arts fundraising consultant in North Carolina, used to be a force for good out here in Seattle. And his question is, how do organizations convince their boards that now is the time to invest money in fundraising strategy when the uncertainty of fundraising and ROI is iffy at best? I would say that, if investing in fundraising and ROI is iffy, not investing in fundraising the potential ROI is like life-threatening, depending on where you are as an organization and your cash flow and all that other stuff that's very particular to each organization. There is a lot of thought leadership work out there about the return on investment for fundraising. And I think it's important to look at examples of organizations. There's plenty from the 2008 and 2009 recession who chose to cut fundraising along with cutting programs, and who put themselves, they were at the tippy top of that death spiral and they went all the way down. So storytelling, as ever, is the answer to how you convince people to do stuff. Find some examples and show them the fate you want to avoid.
A lot of times people come to us as consultants with like a lot of urgency. Like they think that we're going to come on and like, it's going to start raising money like immediately. And it's just like anything. It's a long game. You know what I mean? Like, building a relationship with somebody who wants to invest in your cause does not happen overnight. And so this is going to be the same case with any of these new implementations, practices, digital strategies. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's going to be important that if you want to be successful at it, it's time to invest in it. Like I had to like reluctantly just upgrade my Zoom account because I was like, none of my clients want to meet with me face to face. I'm like, okay, well, I want a video with you because if I have a stupid idea and I can't see the reaction on your face, I don't know like the level of stupid, like on a scale from 1 to really silly, right? Like you're just going to have to be open to change right now. And I think the sooner you just embrace it, the more you might find that you're like having fun with it.
Yeah, it's good. Can you look on the bright
I'm
side?
obviously like a digital evangelist though. So I'm just excited for people to want to communicate this way.
Yeah. Okay. So Autumn has asked another good question. What about walks or endurance events, and how do you motivate people to register now with the walks a few months away? It's interesting. That one is definitely a conundrum. I mean, we do have some hunch that summer will be a better time in terms of coronavirus, but I think you need to be making a contingency plan. Walk models, they will translate into virtual peer-to-peer so easily.
If you have people on Teams fundraising, like that's exactly what we're trying to do with our table captains. Like that's a really good way actually of trying to think about your table captains, is that now they're like the walk and outdoor. I don't really do events like that, honestly, but that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it lends itself really well to peer-to-peer in a virtual context. And I would really encourage you, again, in the spirit of decisiveness and having the most possible time you can to plan to execute this pivot, to think about taking that virtual and digital.
But honestly, in terms of like the vibe in Seattle here, outdoor spaces are feeling like spaces that are more comfortable to gather right now. I have a 1-year-old and we're having play dates like outside, even if the weather's not great, just because I think people would rather be outside in the open air rather than inside. So I think anything you can think about that is outdoors is cool, but just know, as someone who does plan a lot of outdoor events that are not necessarily sportsing, it is, I'm sure you know this, Autumn, kind of scary as it relates to weather and tenting and all this. It's expensive and hard to do things outdoors, but you gotta do what you gotta do. I also have a fun idea about a duck dodge for anybody in Seattle who wants to get down with some boat action. Contact me. I really want somebody to
take advantage of
this idea. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like, we've gone through a bunch of the questions we selected that had been submitted previously. If anybody has another burning question to ask, put it through the chat right now, because I think it's about time for us to sign off. And remember, here's our contact information again. Add us on LinkedIn, hit up our websites, email me. I've been emailing with you guys all week, even outside of the context of this webinar. Hit my website, see the other ways I'm trying to help. Follow our Real Talk Fundraising Insta. There's not much there right now, but there will be. I guess we will sign off from Seattle, the epicenter of coronavirus right now. And it's our hope that we've, helped not only organizations who are right in there with us right now, but organizations around the country who are who are on their way. And yes, to everyone who's asking about panel slides and the video. Don't worry.
We're gonna over deliver on that. and if I may just bring it back to the heart, like, what a privilege to be able to share our thoughts with you all. And thank you for your thought leadership. This is a community now. It's a hive mind. It's a brain trust. And we are so grateful for being able to just come together as a community. I really mean it when I say that together we are stronger. So let's keep in touch.
Awesome. Okay. Well, without any further ado, we will end the webinar now, and may the force be with you all.
All right. Ciao.